Hello everyone and welcome to Tes Live Lessons. My name is Josh and today you'll be taking part in a fun-packed science lesson at RHS Harlow Car Garden in Yorkshire. You'll hear from horticultural experts who will be taking you around the gardens, and through activities and role-play, you'll investigate how the plants have adapted to their environments and how that helps them to survive and evolve. Now I'll hand over to Janet and Ruth. Have a fantastic lesson and don't forget to have lots of fun.
Hi everyone, welcome to the RHS at Harlow Car in North Yorkshire, UK. I'm Janet.
And I'm Ruth.
We're one of 5 RHS gardens across the country, and I wonder if you know what the RHS actually stands for. It's on my clothes here. It's the Royal Horticultural Society. Now, horticultural just means plants. Everything to do with plants, how to grow them, understanding them, and hopefully you're going to get to see a nice range of them here in our garden, even though it's winter time.
Before we talk to you about what we're going to do today, get ready with your pencil and paper. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to quickly draw a plant and then show it to your partner. Go.
Let's see what the students at Snaresbrook Primary School have done. Fantastic work, everyone. I wonder if your plants are looking the same as ours. And have you done those basic parts? So all plants tend to have a stem and the leaves and flowers. Did you remember to put the roots on? I hope you did. That'd be fantastic if you did. But why we're here today is because actually there is so much variation of plants out there. Plants are adapted to suit the conditions of where they live in their environment. And some of those environments are really extreme. So we want you to learn about the adaptations today, and we're going to first of all head to our Alpine house. Now, all the plants in here have grown in alpine areas of the world, and they're specifically adapted to grow in those conditions. So where in the world do I mean? There's different climatic zones around the world, and you probably already know that there's an imaginary line around the middle called the equator. And around the equator is the tropics, where it's really hot, really humid. And then if you move out from that, you enter the subtropical zone. So it's just a little bit cooler. And then we go into the temperate zone, where the UK is. So if you think about the sorts of conditions that we'd have in those areas. And then finally we enter the polar regions, and that's where the alpine areas are, and also really high up in the mountains. So what I'd like you to do is get your pencil and paper ready again and have a think about what might the conditions be like in those alpine areas. So remember, it's polar and it's really high up in the mountains. See how many you can jot down in 1 minute. Okay, time is up. Let's hear how some of the students have got on.
The weather in the alpine environment is very cold, and the reason that the plants are so small is because it's also very windy. So they have to be small, because if they're really tall, that means that they would fall over, and there wouldn't really be many of them left. I've written here in my book, it would be like in negative degrees, and it wouldn't be anything above 10 degrees. It would be 10 degrees or lower. I think it would be like wet and snowy and like icy.
Snowy for sure, and windy and frosty.
You could get lots of wind and like rain, and just generally the weather would be really cold.
If you said really low temperature, cold, you are right. The temperature in the alpine regions never goes above 10 degrees C. If you said really windy, you're right again. And if you said it often snows, yes. So that's brilliant work if you manage to get those three. So our gardeners have to work really hard to recreate those conditions and make them suitable for the plants. So in our greenhouse, we've got all the windows open all the time, and we've got fans creating that wind all the time. But they find doing the snow a little bit harder. Let's have a look at the soil the plants are growing in. Now you can see it's really stony and loose, and there's hardly any nutrients in it. So putting all those conditions together, if you were a plant trying to grow in the alpine areas, how would you adapt? How would you make sure you're going to be able to survive in those sorts of conditions? We're going to have a close-up look at some of our plants in here. As we look at each plant, I'd like you to see if you can do this activity for me. So what you've got is pictures of different plants and their adaptations. And then at the bottom, you've got the reasons for those adaptations. How is it an advantage and helps them to survive? So what you need to do is try and match them together. So let's start with this first one, which is this gorgeous little plant here. Now you'll notice that quite a lot of the plants in the alpine areas are really, really small. Now that's partly because it's cold and the soil doesn't have much nutrients in, so they can't grow very quickly. But also, think about it, if they grew really tall, then they'd just be blown over in that strong wind. And by being really close to the ground, then they've actually can keep warmer. So that helps them to grow. See if you can match that one up to the box at the bottom. So you do get some trees in the alpine areas, but not very many. And those that are there have all evolved to be small, like this pine tree behind me. Now, I bet you all know a pine cone, and this is where the seeds are held inside. So how have they evolved to be small like this in the alpine areas? Well, just imagine those seeds arriving and landing in an alpine area. And some of them are going to grow really tall, and some of them are only grow small. Those tall ones, though, they're going to get blown down in those strong winds. And so they're not going to survive, they're not going to have a chance to reproduce and actually make seeds of their own in their pine cones. And so over time, the tall trees die out. But the small ones, they can survive. And so they do get a chance to make their pine cones and to make their seeds. And inside will be the instructions that say, only grow small. And so we get survival of the fittest. And that's what drives evolution. Okay, imagine you're in a really cold place. Show me what you'd be doing to keep yourself warm. I bet you're all doing this and huddling and keeping that heat in. It's what we instinctively do. And the plants in the alpine areas do the same. Look at this one that's growing like a mound. Instead of spreading itself out, what it's done is it's reduced its surface area, and that means it's not losing as much heat. There's also a really good thing about this design, that if it does snow, then it will be probably completely covered. And snow, although we think of it as being really cold, is actually lots of little flakes that trap air in between, and so it's a great insulator. Polar bears will hibernate deep under the snow. And thinking of polar bears, they've got really thick fur to keep them warm. Well, alpine plants have hairs as well. How are you getting on with your matching up activity? We're moving on now to this one, leaves covered in hairs. And you should be able to see the hairs on the plant here. So just like the hairs of an animal help to keep it warm by trapping the warm air next to them, it's the same with the plants. But they also do something else. They help to trap in some moisture, because those really windy conditions can actually carry away all of the moisture in the air. So this technique, this adaptation, helps to keep some of the water on the plant. So some plants have fleshy, succulent leaves so that when it rains, they can absorb that water and swell up to store it inside, just like many plants do in the desert, cactus. Many plants have evergreen leaves, so as soon as that temperature rises above 0 degrees Celsius, they can start to photosynthesize. They're ready. And lots of the flowers will have this sort of cup shape, which traps the warmth inside. And they might even track the movement of the sun across the sky during the day to keep it as warm as possible. They're trying to draw in the pollinators. And in alpine areas, that's usually flies. But while we're talking about pollinators, I must show you a really amazing plant. This plant isn't on your sheet, but it's so amazing I just had to show it to you. It's called Masonia, and it's really special because it's actually pollinated by gerbils. As they run over the top, the pollen gets stuck to their fur, and they help to spread it around. and there's hardly any plants that are pollinated by rodents. I'll just give you a minute to finish up matching on your sheet, and if you think you've already done it, can you jot down anything else you remember that we've talked about in the Alpine House? Let's see how you've got on. I bet you've done a fabulous job. So taking that first one, small and grow low to the ground. Where did you join it? Hopefully down here with to keep out of the wind where the temperature is higher. So well done if you got that one. Cup-shaped flowers. Did you take it down here, warmer inside to attract insects for pollination? Well done if you did. What about this one? Grow in a mound shape. Take it down here, reduces the surface area to keep in the warmth. Two more. Leaves covered in hairs. If you remember, it traps the heat and the moisture. And finally, those succulent leaves. Well, there's only one left. Fleshy leaves swell up to store water. I hope you've really enjoyed having a good look around the Alpine House. But have you noticed something? We haven't been able to see any of the roots of these plants. How do you think they're adapted to cope with the conditions we've talked about? Have a think, and we're going to come back to it later. So we're now here behind the scenes, and you're so lucky because most visitors don't ever get to come here. And here's Amy, one of our gardeners. She's actually an alpine specialist. Hi, Amy.
Hello.
So, Amy, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got to work here at Harlow Carr?
Yeah, well, all my past experience was in growing vegetables, and then I joined the team 13 years ago back in the plant centre. I then did my RHS level 2 Principles of Horticulture at college while I was at the plant centre. I then went on to do my traineeship in the garden and became a member of the horticultural floral team after that, and then in the Alpines.
And here, and we've been in the Alpine House and we've been looking at the adaptations, and they're absolutely wonderful. But what we couldn't see were the roots, and we wondered how they were adapted. Yeah. Are you able to show us what the roots look like?
So this plant I'm looking at is called a Louisia. So this is what it looks like when it's at its best. I then have two other little ones. So I have this one, Louisia Elise. So this one flowers in all different colours. So orange, pinks, whites. So it's a very good Louisia. So if I knock the plant out, so first of all I take the grit off the top. So that's around its neck to stop it from rotting off. And then I knock out the plant. You can see all the plant's roots here. So it has a thin neck, so it grows down between the rocks. It'll then, where all the rock and grit is, it'll then spread its roots and find all the goodness in the soil and the moisture and spread out below the rock level.
That makes sense, because we saw how stony that soil actually was. That's brilliant. So first of all, I have to go in and then they spread themselves out. That's wonderful. So is there any other sort of specialist things you need to do to look after these alpine plants?
Well, something that's really important is to keep them from rotting. So we have a very free-draining, gritty soil to make sure. We also have to take all the dead pieces of the plant away. So any dead leaves, we use our tweezers and we individually remove all the leaves, any dead flowers, any flower heads we remove as well using our tweezers, or we can snip off the flowers.
So you're a real artist, because the way that you display them, you just make them look absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, that's the classic. So we have the classic plunges in the Alpine house.
Just to be able to put them on display for everybody. Thank you so much for showing us behind the scenes.
Thank you.
So we're going to head to a different part of Harlow Car Garden now. Over to Ruth.
Hi there everyone. Take a look at the plants around here. What sort of environment do you think we're in now? The plants in this area evolved to live in the subtropical areas of the world. What do you think the physical conditions are like in the subtropical environments? Can you compare them to the alpine plants that we looked at earlier? In these areas, summer is very long, hot and often rainy. Winter is very mild, usually without frost or freezing temperatures. But we've had freezing temperatures this week. Here's a plant we had to wrap up its crown from the frost. The best conditions for plants to grow are without the sub-zero temperatures, but it creates another problem for them: competition. They have to be able to compete with each other to be able to grow, and it's a case of survival of the fittest. So how are these plants different to those in the alpine areas? How are these plants making sure that they are the winners in the growing competition? The alpine plants grow very close to the ground because the plants are keeping out of the strong cold winds. So let's be an alpine plant by crouching down low, close to the stony soil to protect ourselves from those winds. Everyone, out of your seat and find somewhere with space around you. Now crouch down, making yourself very small like an alpine plant. Now look at these subtropical plants that are adapted to grow in quite different conditions. They are able to grow much taller and reach for the sunlight as they compete with the other plants around them. Show us how the plants have changed their habit in these subtropical conditions without the strong winds and the longer hours of sunlight. Show me how you can grow from your alpine plant into a tropical plant, stretching your leaves. Now return to your seats. Bigger leaves can absorb so much more light to make food by photosynthesis. And because it's so moist and humid in the subtropics, they don't have to worry about losing too much water through transpiration. Many tropical plant leaves have a pointy tip known as a drip tip, which allows the water to drain off the leaf quickly without it becoming too heavy and damaging the leaf. This adaptation, along with the waxy covering, stops algae growing on the leaves. The algae on the leaf surface would make it more difficult for the plant to get the sunlight it needs. Now, can you show me, using your hands and your fingers, your drip tips so the water can drain off the ends of your fingers. There are other animals living in the subtropical areas that are herbivores. How would you change if there were lots of animals that wanted to eat you? Would you be really fierce? Now, some plants have sharp spines on the leaves. To stop animals grazing on the tasty leaves and stems, this plant has evolved leaves which have spines to protect the plants from damage and keeps their vital water stores safe. Look at the shape of these flowers. Which animals do you think might be able to reach inside these to pollinate them? They're from Peru originally and are pollinated by hummingbirds with really long tongues. In the subtropics, insects, birds and bats all act as pollinators. Hopefully, from just this quick look in the subtropical garden, even in the winter, you can see that the plants are very different to those in the alpine areas, and it helps give you an understanding that there's so much variety of plants in the world. All these plants have adapted to their growing conditions and reproduce plants that share these traits.
We've come back inside because it's a little bit cold out there. But did you know that you can buy plants that have evolved in all the different environments all over the world? But if you do, make sure that you check that it's got a plant passport. This will explain to you where it's come from. And also on the label of the plant, it will explain how to look after it, how to keep it nice and healthy. And it's plant experts and horticulturalists who've worked all of that out.
We've got a task for you as our new plant experts. We're sending you on a mission to explore a new island that has just been discovered in the Pacific Ocean, where no one has been before. We want you to investigate and let us know how the plants on the island have evolved to survive there. It might take some time, but please do get back to us and share photos of your design. Teachers, you can tag us on social media.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you've enjoyed having a look around RHS Harlow Car and seeing all the different plants and learning about their different adaptations. We've been to the Alpine House and the Subtropical Garden and seen how those plants have evolved to survive in these unique conditions. Come and visit us soon, but don't forget to send us those photos of those plant designs. Bye everyone!